Your blindfold is stripped off your head. You open your eyes. In front of you are 6 men, each masked covering their faces, AK-47s at hand. 2 at the front hold thin, sharp knives. 1 at the back has a pair of pliers and sharp scissors in his hand. You look your killer in the eye, begging for any remote sense of compassion or mercy. Emotion begins bubbling inside you until you can't take it anymore. Your body begins to shake with emotion, fear, anger, and sorrow all at once. But he just stares back, cold as ice, and then he laughs. It's this chilling laugh that tells you this nightmare is just beginning. Once you were in that room with those masked men and their weapons, you knew your life would never be the same, if you even survived at all. And no, this isn't some kind of medieval torture method, but this exact scene was a reality for thousands of men across Mexico who got on the wrong side of Mexican drug cartels and gangs. Now let's go through some of the most brutal torture methods from these cartels. Flaying. In 2010, Mexican drug lord El Chapo gained headlines for the brutal torture method known as flaying. The victim would be set up in the exact position described before, suffering unimaginable torment as their skin was peeled away with a knife, starting with their legs and chest, then moving to other parts of their bodies. The torture reached its peak when their faces were flayed, each cut bringing a fresh wave of excruciating pain. Their screams echoed through the room, desperate pleas for mercy ignored. Every horrifying moment was recorded on camera, creating a gruesome warning for anyone who might think about crossing El Chapo or the Sinaloa cartel. This brutal form of torture was often kept for the worst of the worst. High-ranking rival gang members, double agents, or the worst of all, anyone who turned their back on El Chapo and his cartel. But oh no, the brutality didn't stop there. There were other factors which made this possibly one of the most brutal torture methods in the book. In January 2010, locals in the town of Los Mochis came across the body of 36-year-old Hugo Hernandez in the streets of their town. Hugo had been kidnapped on January the 2nd and taken to Sinaloa. El Chapo himself brutally dismembered Hernandez's limbs and later his face. But the terror didn't end there. In a twisted final act, El Chapo ordered his men to stitch Hugo's face onto a soccer ball, leaving it alongside his torso in a plastic container. The gruesome package came with a chilling note. "Happy New Year, because this will be your last." This gruesome display was El Chapo's way of showing his power, a chilling reminder that he was untouchable. The image of Hugo's face on that soccer ball became a terrifying symbol of the cartel's ruthless reach throughout Mexico. These stories were whispered in hushed tones, spreading like wildfire. Almost everyone knew someone who had a friend, a cousin, or a neighbor who had disappeared or met a gruesome end. It wasn't just about the violence, it was about the message it sent. El Chapo's reign was built on fear, a fear so deep it seeped into every corner of life in Mexico. Waterboarding. Waterboarding is nothing new as far as torture methods are concerned, but this one had a little twist. Victims are stripped of their freedom, tied down completely immobile. A thick rag is shoved violently into their mouths to muffle any desperate screams or pleas for mercy, because the screams won't be heeded, only savored by their torturers. Then they feel it, cold liquid beginning to slowly pour over their faces, soaking the rag. It's getting harder to breathe with each passing second. You're gasping for air as the rag clings tighter and tighter to your skin, totally suffocating you. Your nostrils are burning, your lungs screaming for oxygen that isn't coming. This is the horrific reality of Tehuacanazo, the cartel's sickening twist on waterboarding. These psychopaths don't use plain water, though. Oh no, that would be too easy, too humane for their sadistic minds. They favor pouring carbonated sodas over your face, or mixing in blisteringly hot chili peppers and spices to inflict maximum physical and psychological agony. These sadistic cartel gangs have mastered a true art form, making you experience the feeling of dying over and over for their sick amusement. Just as you think you're about to finally lose consciousness and escape the torture, they'll pause, but not out of mercy. Oh no, they allow you to suck in a few desperate, ragged breaths through that rag, just enough to keep you conscious before plunging you right back into that primal life-or-death fight. They'll do it over and over again, laughing mercilessly while you squirm around helplessly. It's a cold, chilling laugh that cuts through the gurgles and gasps, mocking your primal struggle for life. Your mind goes into pure panic mode as fear like you've never experienced before sets in. You're being murdered, but it's dragging out into an endless nightmare, an unholy marriage of drowning and being burned alive simultaneously. These are the depravities the Mexican cartels gleefully visit upon anyone who dares cross them: rivals, civilians, even their own members if they smell disloyalty. No boundary is too depraved for their sadistic minds to cross. Feeding to animals. If you were lucky, these cartels would just shoot you in the back of the head, but that would be too easy for them. They usually have something much more cruel in mind. Rather than just keeping dangerous predators like lions and tigers as symbols of wealth and power, these sadists use the animals for torture and execution of rival gang members. According to a 2022 indictment from the Southern District of New York, members of the powerful Sinaloa cartel faction, led by the sons of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, engaged in horrific acts at a ranch belonging to Ivan Salazar. Captives, including rival traffickers and officials who threatened the cartel's operations, were taken to Salazar's ranch, where they were brutally tortured. The gang tested their drugs on these captives and attempted to squeeze as much information as possible from them before ultimately killing them. The indictment alleges that rivals of the cartel and government officials who refused to cooperate were sometimes fed dead or alive to tigers kept at the ranch belonging to the Salazar brothers. These owners purposefully starved their tiger pets, meaning when they were done torturing you with however they pleased, their pet would be waiting for you to be their new lunchtime snack. So while keeping exotic animals as symbols of wealth is disturbing enough, using them as instruments of torture and execution is a whole new level of depravity. Yet according to U.S. prosecutors, that's exactly what certain Mexican cartels like the Sinaloa cartel, led by Chapo's sons, have done. Psychological warfare. These Mexican drug lords don't just break bones and spill blood. Their real mastery lies in the unbearable psychological torture they put their captives through. Forget being grabbed off the street and tossed into some blacked-out van. That's just their warm-up act as you spend endless days, maybe weeks, locked in total sensory deprivation. And that's when the real trouble begins. The constant fear that they'll come to you at any given moment and mercilessly unleash any of the horrific torture methods they have in their arsenal. And for one 20-year-old named Felix, experienced the very worst of it. Captured by the cartels in 2010, Felix tells the story of how he was beaten, electrocuted, and held ransom to his poverty-ridden family until they paid up for his release. At the very worst, he was forced to watch other captives being beaten and tortured right in front of him. In between, he was beaten and electrocuted while his family was on the phone as the sick gang members demanded money for his release. But if you were unlucky, they'd point their pistol right on your forehead, tell you to say a prayer, and pull the trigger before you're finished. Just a mock execution, fool. But they'll gladly run it back over and over, throwing in new curveballs like chokingly gassing you until you puke, or maybe binding you spread eagle above a pit of hissing reptilian nightmares eagerly waiting for you. El Guizo. Now, this may be one of the worst cartel torture methods of them all. Prepare yourself for El Guizo, otherwise known as the stew. This is one of the few methods that don't involve any guns, any wild animals, or even any other weapons, but shows the inhuman nature of these psychopathic drug lords. We're talking about filling up a huge industrial barrel with water, then adding a wicked kick of concentrated sulfuric acid, instantly transforming it into a roiling, spitting cauldron of death, just waiting to dissolve anything it touches. Once that bubbling witch's brew from hell has reached a nice boil, it's showtime for the true ingredients: terrified human victims, ready to be totally submerged into the cauldron. And I don't mean they just toss in cold corpses either. Oh no, that'd be too humane for these sick gangs. These guys will put live victims into this cauldron, allowing them to experience excruciating pain as they're slowly burned alive, taking in every shriek and scream of their victim. And the only thing that'll be left after you're finished in this cauldron is the remains of your bones, hours after you've disintegrated and nothing remains. No one knows exactly which twisted individual first created this torture method, but two men in the narco-terrorist world brought this into popularity. We're talking about real-life sickos like Santiago Meza Lopez, otherwise known by his morbidly ironic street name, El Pozolero, Spanish for the stew maker. This former Sinaloa cartel member admitted to personally putting over 300 victims through his simmering process while active. Dismemberment. In 2015, an ex-narco associate was forced to watch as cartel hitman El Chano Vasquez took an axe to the man's own daughter. The young girl was dismembered piece by agonizing piece, all while his family and some other onlookers were there, crying out in despair at every axe swing. This brutal act of dismemberment was far more than a sickening power move for the Zetas. It was a calculated form of torture designed to inflict the most excruciating pain possible. But it gets even worse. Think you could handle some limbs being chopped off before passing out? Think again. Victims were often injected with adrenaline or heroin to keep them fully awake and aware. Torturers carefully avoided major arteries, making the victims bleed out slowly. The infections that set in caused hours or days of unimaginable suffering. The screams and horrific realization of their fate were part of the torment the Zetas intended. This brutality had a dual purpose: extracting every last secret from the victim and disposing of the bodies with ease. Through these barbaric methods, they maintain an iron grip on power and instill deep fear within the communities they control. The psychological and physical torture inflicted on their victims serves not only to extract information, but also to send a chilling message. If you or anyone you know gets in our way, the same fate awaits you. In extreme cases, the limbs of these gang rivals can be spread across multiple locations, left hanging from bridges, or even planted on the doorstep of enemy territory, sending a chilling message to gang rivals. Cannibalism. You think you've heard it all from these bloodthirsty cartels? Brace yourself for the twisted reality of ritualized cannibalism among the narco soldiers of Mexico's underworld. For the ruthless Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, and its sadistic kingpin, El Mencho, desensitizing new recruits to extreme violence is just another day at the office. Their playbook is the stuff of nightmares, forcing new recruits to chow down on severed toes and fingers torn from some unfortunate victim's body. If the sight of all that mangled flesh makes you puke, too bad. The instructors will scoop up those regurgitated chunks and feed them to you again until you keep it all down. This horrifying initiation serves as a brutal lesson in obedience and desensitization. But eating those hacked-off digits is just an appetizer for what's to come. Pass that hell-forged trial, and congratulations, you've earned yourself an all-you-can-eat buffet of body parts, shoving down intestines and muscles until your very soul feels soaked in blood and guts. If filling your belly with human remains doesn't make you dead inside, the CJNG has another horrific trick up their sleeves, sleeping beside the rotting cadavers you just cannibalized. This ritual isn't just about creating fearless killers. It totally destroys the former identities of the new recruits they bring in. Now, they're a part of this gang for life. They emerge reborn as remorseless butchers, with their minds and souls now belonging entirely to the narco machine. This ritual isn't just about creating fearless killers. It completely destroys the recruits' former identities. They emerge as remorseless butchers, their minds and souls owned by the narco machine. The sadistic ritual aims to desensitize recruits to violence, making them capable of committing heinous acts without hesitation. It also breaks down psychological barriers, ensuring total loyalty and obedience to the cartel. This transformation into fearless killers is essential for maintaining the CJNG's reign of terror. The CJNG's use of cannibalism and brutal initiation rites highlights the extreme lengths Mexican drug cartels go to train their recruits for the narco world. This practice is a chilling reminder of the ruthless tactics these cartels use to maintain control and spread terror. Hanging. You think you've heard it all about the depraved acts of Mexico's narco underworld? Well, brace yourself for the cartel's sickening signature move. Human bodies strung up and left dangling like bulging piñatas over highways and overpasses across the country. No, this isn't some medieval torture flashback. It's present-day reality seared into the eyeballs of anyone unlucky enough to catch a glimpse of these corpses. In 2016, drivers crossing a bridge in Tijuana had their morning commute disrupted by the gruesome sight of a human body swaying overhead, limbs bent at sickening angles like a hanged marionette puppet. Flash forward to 2021, and police in Zacatecas arrive to find not just one, but 9 unlucky souls hungrily lashed to an overpass span in a vicious act of retaliation after over a dozen cartel members got whacked. Those 9 prisoners of gravity twisted in the open air like a barbecue roast for nearly half a day. From Culiacan to Nuevo Laredo, these dangling bodies became a common sight. The cartel's way of signaling whose turf you're rolling through now with the most brutal territorial contest imaginable. The more bodies in each grisly bunch, the more obvious the message of the cartel becomes. It's the sickest of sick power moves, designed to send a clear message to anyone rivaling these gang members. Cartel kitchens. For anyone who got on the wrong side of the Las Zetas cartel, there was a hidden destination they could find themselves in. Take La Galera Ranch, for instance. That twisted butcher shop used to be run by Los Zetas. Their routine was straightforward: stalk a target, snatch them up, and drag them to one of their sick little kitchens scattered nationwide. Then the real fun began. Torture, interrogation, you name it. They would round it off by burning the bodies, leaving zero trace. Authorities figure over 60,000 poor souls have gotten mulched by the cartel ovens since 2006. Cops are still digging up mass graves, trying to ID countless victims from mere scraps of bones, teeth, and nails. The psychological games they'd play were unbearable. Victims would lose their minds just watching, hearing the other unlucky victims screaming in anguish before the cutting even started. Mind-shattering terror tactics were meant to break you from the inside out. The Zetas didn't stop at mere torture. They escalated to flaying, dismemberments, and human sawing. Victims were injected with adrenaline or heroin to keep them conscious during the ordeal. But the physical torture was only part of the horror. The psychological torment was just as devastating. Victims were forced to witness others being mutilated, their screams echoing through the chambers. This relentless exposure to brutality was enough to shatter even the strongest minds before their own torture began. Those unlucky enough to survive were never the same, their spirits broken by the sheer depravity they had witnessed and endured. This reign of terror wasn't just about killing, it was about asserting dominance through unparalleled cruelty. Each act of violence served as a grim reminder of the Zetas' power and their willingness to go to any lengths to maintain control. The public displays of dismembered bodies were not just warnings, but declarations of their ruthless authority. Chainsaw beheadings. In 2011, a brutal cartel torture method shocked the world. Felix Garcia and his uncle Barnabas Castro were caught stealing from drug lords and forced to record a video admitting their crimes. The punishment? A horrifying beheading filmed for everyone to see. Cartels use these graphic videos not just to punish, but to spread terror. By sharing these brutal acts online, they send a clear message: betray us, and you will face the same fate. The fear created by these videos goes far beyond those directly involved in the drug trade. Beheadings serve not just as punishments, but as strategic tools of terror for the cartels. The graphic nature of these videos, readily available online, amplifies their impact, spreading fear far beyond those directly involved in the drug trade. By publicizing such brutal acts, the cartels assert their dominance and deter any thoughts of betrayal or resistance. The tragic fate of Garcia and Castro is a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in the drug war, where the stakes are life and death. Cartels use extreme violence to keep their power and control. These public executions are designed to scare entire communities into submission. This strategy of fear and control is key to their dominance. The horrifying videos serve as both a warning and a tool to maintain their iron grip on power. Electrocution. Among their most chilling methods is the use of electrocution as a form of torture. The sons of infamous drug lord El Chapo and their associates have employed electric shocks as part of their torture repertoire. This practice takes place in secluded locations, often on remote ranches owned by cartel members. Electrocution is what these guys do for a couple reasons. It causes unbearable pain without leaving visible marks. They have full control over how painful the experience is, and can even play around with the victim psychologically. Cartels use various devices, from simple car batteries to more advanced equipment, to administer these shocks. The victims of this cruel treatment include rival gang members, law enforcement officers, and even cartel insiders who need to be punished for whatever they get up to, but it gets worse. Often, these electrocution shocks are used in tandem with the other methods mentioned before. This is done to maximize their suffering and totally break the will of the captives. This isn't just violence, it's a calculated show of force. The cartels are painting a terrifying picture, daring anyone to stand against them. They're not just criminals, they're masters of fear, using shock and horror to rule their empire. Meanwhile, brave police and soldiers face an uphill battle. They're not just fighting thugs with guns, but a shadow army that uses terror as its weapon. Every day, innocent people get caught in this dangerous game, never knowing when violence might erupt on their doorstep. Mexican drug cartels use these cruel methods to scare people and stay in power. They don't just kill, they torture in ways that are almost unbearable to imagine. From skinning people alive to feeding them to tigers, these gangs will do anything to spread fear. Their violence isn't random. It's a calculated way to control people through terror. They want everyone to know what happens if you cross them. The message is clear: don't even think about getting in our way. While police try to fight back, regular people live in constant fear. The cartel's influence spreads far beyond Mexico, affecting lives around the world. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section, and before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Criminal Corner so you don't miss the next ones.